Live. 7 seconds in before we go alive. Kick it old school. Morgan,
Hey.
Morgan. How's it going?
Oh, I haven't heard that in a while. Hello from the other side of the camera this week. Uh, instead of sharing physical space, here we are back to our normal digital hidey holes.
Yeah, not that it wasn't nice to have you here, but like,
Danger, Will Rogers. Like, what? You're able to actually move around and
I have to worry about like,
uh-huh. That's very funny. Well, if you're here, drop a hi in chat. We'd love to hear from you. Um, Nick, what is the question of the day?
question of the day. How about do you miss in-person networking?
Um,
Do you miss in-person networking?
uh, I miss some of it, and we'd love to hear from you in the chat. Pros and cons of in person, things that you like or don't like. I love being able to meet people in person, put a physical presence to the name, much like Nick and I did this last week. It was lovely. And a number of other people who watch the show regularly are from Calgary. We did a brewery hangout, and it was lovely. The thing I don't miss about in-person networking is I what I learned is the parrot question. And the parrot question is, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? It's like a parrot. What do you do? And everybody's just asking it again and again and again. And my favorite response ever to that was, "Why do a lot of things? What do you want to know about?" And that usually, well, like, what about work? Like, what do you do for work? And he always sidesteps it with, that's not important. How about, do you have kids? I have kids. And like launches into something else to sort of sidestep those. So I don't miss the whole, what do you do sort of thing. Um,
Pro or con handshakes? I'm gonna go pro.
mm, I still like a good handshake.
Depending on how well I know you, the hug can fit in there sometimes too. Just gotta,
Hmm.
it depends. The
It
old age old
depends.
marketing question.
It depends. Do you miss in-person networking, Nick?
I do actually. I
Mm,
like you, I don't miss the drive-by business carding. Call me if you need anything. I don't know what you do and I don't want to talk to you. Have a nice
yeah.
day. But what I do really miss is what we did last week. Is when look how many gamers have invited the people they just talked to online to their weddings. Look at how many people like ourselves that started a business or became friends through LinkedIn. And we don't ever get to meet them in person for like months, if not years later. And I feel like even though it's so great to build relationships at scale, I think that in-person networking is kind of like that icing on the
Mm,
cake.
hmm.
And honestly, you know what my favorite part is?
Go for it.
You are exact when somebody says, or whenever you get that feeling of you are exactly like you are online.
Mm. See, the problem, the note that everybody makes is that they don't expect me to be as tall as I am.
I've heard that
Because,
a few
yeah,
times.
I know, I heard it a number of times while I was visiting. Because especially here and elsewhere, I'm usually like sitting down, or you only see like the top half of my body, and I have extremely long legs, so I'm definitely a flamingo, pink with long legs. So, um, but yes, it is a high compliment to be like, wow, you're exactly how I expected you to be. That's a nice feeling.
And Brady, I agree with you. Body language, whether it's in meetings or even just meeting people,
Hmm.
it says so much more than we can, in our little Zoom picture or anything else. So I definitely miss that. So, Morgan, everybody's here. They're wondering, how are we going to break into enterprise today?
Using social, perhaps.
Ooh, okay. No one realizes how short I am. Kind of feel like that the same way. No, just kidding. Just compared to Morgan, I feel short.
I understand.
Okay, so I think Morgan's got some audio
Oh
funness
yeah, sorry.
happening right now.
We're back. We're back. I can kick us off today, I think.
Okay.
So, uh we have, by the way, can you hear that background noise? Do you like that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
like
lovely.
that.
There's some construction going on in the building today, so apologies if there's any background noise. I Here's the thing. Every enterprise account has people who are on social. That doesn't necessarily mean they are on LinkedIn. And it doesn't necessarily mean they're on LinkedIn in a content creation, active, commenting thing. But chances are, most of the people that you're going after are on some social platform, mostly for entertainment, not necessarily for professional stuff. They could be on Reddit, they could be on Twitter. They're almost by the numbers guaranteed to be either on Instagram or TikTok. There's, or they're, I mean, they could still be on Facebook, depending upon the industry that you're in. So today's session is titled Using Social to Break into Enterprise Accounts. And while we may tend toward talking through some specifics on LinkedIn, these same principles and plays apply no matter the network that you're using. The number of deals, the number of relationships that have happened because somebody hopped into a Twitter thread with either a VC or a product manager or somebody, like, is astounding. And it's the same sort of stuff. You're threading instead of commenting. I mean, there's all sorts of different little terminology things, but it's still the same. So social can be used to break into enterprise accounts. It just may not always be LinkedIn, even if we talk about some specifics of LinkedIn later today. Oh, I was going to say, so Nick,
Oh, okay. Pass
where
me
would
to
you
me.
like to start? Yes.
I think the hardest part about breaking into enterprise is having a legitimate reason to even reach out at all. And I think that's where we need to talk before we talk into about channels. Because I
Hmm.
think the one thing as a buyer that you never really consider when you're a seller is change is expensive. You know, if you're a large company and wanted to change from, say, Salesforce to Microsoft Dynamics, there has to be a really good reason to do that, or else it's a very expensive choice to make. And as we know, with a lot of SaaS products, most of the value isn't actually achieved because people don't look at the full cost of change management and the implementation value. And so how do you do that, Morgan? How do you build a business case that's so solid that they get excited and want to move fast?
I think it comes in maybe 3 stages, but definitely two.
Ooh, golden three.
I know the golden three, but so the first one is a base level of qualification. Now, qualification or targeting is, are they in the right industry? Are they the right size? Do they meet certain growth metrics? Are they, are they adding headcount? Are they firing headcount? Are they in the right territory? If you're a seller based, on geography, are they in my territory? Do they have people who are likely to purchase this? Do they have the right job titles or the right job descriptions? All of those factors play into creating a base level of qualification. And the reason it's important to start there is that it is a smaller number than your total addressable market. So your TAM, your total addressable market, might be really big, right? It could be pretty broad based, especially if your marketing department hasn't done a really good job articulating your ICP. Chances are your TAM could be really big. Oh, we serve B2B IT services companies in the United States. Goodness, that is a massive TAM. Like, you could sell to anyone in that, right? So actually creating a qualification criteria saying, here's a smaller chunk based on closed won deals, based on ICP knowledge or persona knowledge, based on industry context or industry knowledge, and the things that you know about the industry. Here's a smaller list of highly qualified accounts that I would like to pursue. And then once you have that list built, you begin to prioritize that list. And that's stage 2.
I think most people, when even on, they skip through stage one,
Yeah.
and nobody's ever told them what are the minimums or maximums for somebody to see value from your product or service. What is your sweet spot? What's the sandbox that you should be playing in? I screwed this up miserably when I sold insurance because everybody told me just go and sell to anyone. Hey, Nick, the
Mhm.
greatest part is you can sell to anyone. And then I started reading about our product and I realized that it wasn't in everyone's best interest to have it. But I was like, well, who is this best for? And I started to really dig in to that minimum and maximum. And it was amazing how it changed that conversation. And this is when you know when you're in the right place, is when you start to think of old school networking. When you
Mhm.
say something and that person leans in
Mhm.
and now they're listening, now they're paying attention, they're asking great questions.
And
That's
I
the
also
difference.
and Brandon Flaherty was on the show a few or a couple months ago now, I think. His episode just recently re-released on the podcast. And he was talking about there might, and this comes almost into prioritization, but it could even be part of your list building activity for enterprise accounts, which is there might be really good fit accounts that are just too big that don't match your overall timing criteria, right? So, sure, selling to Adobe would be awesome, or selling into Salesforce would be great. But chances are, selling to a Fortune 10, Fortune 100 sort of company is a very different deal size than going a little bit further down. And Brandon articulated that really well in that episode. And it's something I think about, which is that qualifying accounts, and to Nick's sort of like minimum and maximum idea, is finding almost that Goldilocks zone of an account
Yes.
that's worth pursuing, right? An account that would see value from what you have to offer, and an account that meets all sort of the good criteria that you expect from accounts that your organization or your sales movement has already closed.
And now you know that you have a list that's worth going for.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the issue that I saw whenever one of the partners or someone would give me a list to call, is they might know the sandbox. They spent enough money on market research, but they give me a good starting point. But the starting point is just that, a
Hmm.
starting point. What is the next layer to add prioritization? So that way you're only talking to the people at the right time. And this is the one that I found really interesting. Test or us talking about testing everything,
Hmm.
the mad scientists of social, is that why change? Why now was the next
Hmm.
layer. And if you can have proof, like take a screenshot because you're on call, you're on like you're waiting to going for customer service for 15 minutes, or you book a demo and it takes 3 days for somebody to go and reach out for their miscellaneous. I want to book a useless 15-minute call and do nothing, and then have the AE ask the same questions. You can go and actually document all of that. That documentation is what you can take with you. But
Hmm.
the thing that I found really interesting is if I can't find anything in 10 minutes, anything like there's certain two or three things that are like the triggers that I'd look for, move on.
Yeah. That's such a good principle. I think, Nick, what we've been thinking about and working with sales teams on is the gut check question, which is why are you reaching out to them today versus 60 days from now? Because if you can say, "Oh, I could reach out to them 60 days from now. I don't really know the difference here." That's a gut check to say you got to work on your prioritization. You have to work on these triggers. So there's a few ways I know we've gone about this. One, you can use Google Alerts. I don't remember who was posting about it. It might have been Gabriel Blackwell who had brought it up first, but like searching in quotes the company CEO, right? Their name plus CEO inside Google and seeing recent podcast appearances or reports that were released with their name attached to it and inferring some data or information from those priorities. Looking at triggers from the specific hiring of a role. So one thing that, for example, we look at is, are they hiring or have recently hired a sales enablement person? It's not that we need a sales enablement person. It is an indication that the company is investing in the overall sales organization. And so what we're constructing, as Nick says, is an aligned business case. We're constructing the business case to say, right now is the good time. So those triggers, as they cadence down, become, an event inside the company. Funding round is the very basic thing here, unless if you have
Ugh.
something really related to it. It's just overused. You got to go a level deeper than that.
Well, even with funding round, is why does it matter?
Yeah. It's like, okay, Series C, woo.
But this is like, think of yourself like a detective or a doctor. If you solve a problem, a big enough problem that's worth solving, there's signs and symptoms that it exists before it totally derails that company. And this was what leads into prospecting. Prospecting is what's getting in their way of progress.
Mm,
Why didn't they get that promotion? What's getting in their way? Why can't they do their job in 40 hours? Why is it taking more? Why are they so stressed and frustrated? Why are they on Twitter, LinkedIn, Reddit, Medium, any platform complaining about their job? Why are they giving their company bad scores on culture and employment?
mhm.
These are all different signs and symptoms that there's a problem for you to solve. In
Actually, that's a
absence
great.
of, oh, sorry,
Go ahead.
go for it.
No, no, no. Finish your thought. I had a tangent.
In absence of symptoms,
Mhm.
this is what happens when people are like, yeah, I'm not interested. Because you didn't bring a critical insight with proof and connected the invisible dots. And they're going, oh, and especially when you can tap into the narrative that's already going through in their head. And they're like, cold calling and emailing is getting really tough right now. And I know that social is important because I need to go and build a better pipeline, but I just don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And then
And
you
that's
lead in with that.
right. And that's what I think, like, so for example, if I was selling some sort of people or culture product, it could be intranet, it could be better training, it could be a HR platform or whatever. I would go and find the companies inside the qualification criteria, and I would see if there are any with a recent spate of bad Glassdoor reviews. That's a trigger or an event, right? Because the HR people might be aware that they're getting bad Glassdoor reviews, but as a seller, you could say, I saw that in the last 90 days you had an uptick in bad negative reviews from employees who are leaving your company. And we usually see that, this is that insight Nick's talking about, in companies, blah, 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 based on your knowledge of the industry, based on the knowledge of the companies that you sell into, that they are struggling with XYZ problem, or that they suffer higher retention than their peers, or whatever the actual problem is. And then you're using that as a part of your outreach. But now, chances are, if you're selling this people and culture product, not every company on that list has that spate of bad Glassdoor reviews, right? So that's where you're tailoring the message to the specific company without necessarily doing much personalization, because you're using real life triggers or events that are relevant to the people that you're trying to route into, which we'll get to.
I feel like one of the biggest secrets is the next piece. And it seems to be the most talked about on LinkedIn too. The mythical unicorn, the decision maker, the one to rule them all.
Ba, 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 da.
There isn't just one. But this is where it gets really, really freaking interesting. Is who are the 5 to 10 people in that organization that need to know you exist? When we get to really big enterprise, of course, you want to map out all the profit centers and then go treat them as individual companies. I won't go into that far, but I highly recommend doing that if you're dealing with super large organizations, because then that way you'll have 3 to 5 of those and you'll just map them as if they're individual companies. But who are those 5 or 10 people in that organization that need to know you exist? Google them. And if they're honestly, if the juice is worth the squeeze, listen to the last 2 podcasts they've been on, or even just go through the podcast notes. What other social platform are they on, and which is that they're more personal? Are they on Instagram posting personal stuff? Are they on Twitter posting personal stuff? Where are they researching their industry. And you'd be surprised at how much information is out there. It just might not be on LinkedIn. And this is like the like, oh, like I don't know how many executives, especially on tech, that are on Reddit. Or I'm trying to think of not Slack channels. Oh my god, or another one. What was the one that you got us on? That
Discord?
yeah, I really struggled with. Discord. People have different Discord channels that they're very responsive. Slack channels. One of the weirdest ones I just never thought of that's been really good is WhatsApp channels. And once you figure out like what these people are interested in, you can actually go and find them and go and join in a community, a digital community that they're very active. And within those 5 or 10 people, if you don't find a single person that's active on social, do you really want to work with them at all?
It's a worthwhile question. One thing though, didn't want to miss out on, Nick. You have a great analogy for figuring out who those 5 to 10 people should be. Thinking about like an earthquake, the zone or
Oh,
radius of impact. And I think this is the main question I know we hear a lot is like, this is an enterprise account, and yeah, they have like a lot of titles or a lot of people doing stuff. Who do I start with? Who should I focus on in that 5 to 10?
yeah. So what happens a lot of the time is people get caught in the eye of the hurricane. And so there'll be this hurricane where the decision maker or one of the people that own the P&L and making that decision sit there and they're completely isolated from the problems. They don't see it. Sometimes they don't care. They're stuck in the eye of the hurricane. So when you're trying to tell them there's a problem, they're going, yeah, I'm not
Maybe.
interested. Have a
Yeah.
nice. No, it's not even that. It's I'm not interested. That's not a priority. They're
Hmm.
totally isolated. And so what I switched is I looking at it like it's a hurricane is why change, why now is why change. Where's that change felt? And where's the magnitude of that pain felt moving away from where that started? And that's my 5 to 10 people. So if it's sales, rippling out, like people on the ground level might be who I'd start with, or a manager, or a director of sales development, or even I might even get into like performance marketing. Is
Mm-hmm.
I'll map out that entire earthquake and seeing where the inability to source good pipeline is felt.
Hmm.
Honestly, for lack of better terms, I want to know who's ready to bitch about it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
seriously, I want to have that conversation and I want them to give me insights into what is getting in their way. And when you ask questions about that and you're not, so Morgan, tell me about yourself. You got to
Oh goodness.
like, hey, it looks like your management doesn't want to go and spend any money on ads. That must be fun. How you dealing with that? But this is that poke the bear where you're
Hmm.
challenging them on their work and why they're not getting progress. And what you're doing is you're building that business case as you go through. So as you're moving up the ladder or as you're like if you're starting in the middle and expanding out, by the end of it, you have this killer business case that's based on insight and hopefully you've also quantified the problem. Because I think that's also too. So I'll ask you, Morgan,
Mm-hmm.
if say Aligned offered $100,000 consulting package,
Mm-hmm.
and we quantified that we could help this company go and increase their revenue by, let's say, $10 million over the next year,
Sure.
but their close to one ratio was only 10%.
Mm-hmm.
Would you sell it to them?
Nope.
Why?
That opportunity to close ratio is too low.
So AKA, they're not going to see any value above
Right.
what we're charging.
Right. Yeah.
But this is that business case with proof that you're going, and it's really hard because you need to go and frame that for them and give them potential calculations and say,
Hmm.
hey, this is what people in your shoes have used before to see if this makes sense. But this is where you lean with disqualification, not qualification. Because you
Hmm.
qualified them to have them on the list in the first place. Now you're disqualifying if now's the time. And this is when it just changes the whole game because you're like, actually, I ran the numbers that you gave me. which is also a good show if they're a champion or not. If they can get you the information and if they want to play ball and work with you to build this number, and they're like you're not going to break even. I would hold off until like this, or this changes. But now you're a value add. That's a huge difference from what most sellers are doing right now.
Hmm. And just to clarify, the quick math on that is that if they generated $1 million of revenue and they're only a 10% close one ratio, then they're breaking even on the fee that we would charge in that hypothetical scenario, just for if the math didn't connect for people there. Um, the the best place, and Liz is hinting at this in the comments, is that we can honestly access those people who are in the earthquake radius, who are feeling the impact or can answer why change on social. It's not going to be everyone. Again, and it may not always be LinkedIn, but there are always going to be ways to construct those insights by just building relationships with people on social. And this is why I think something that I see too often in sales, and it's not coming from sales, this is an outsider perspective, but we sort of rush in to try and get the first person as the right person for the account.
Yep.
And I have never, ever had that happen. Like the only time that the right person was actually the right person was on a referral.
Yep.
That's it.
Exactly. Or an
It's
intro.
or an intro. That's basically the only time it's guaranteed that they're the right person. Oftentimes, the first or second or third person you talk to isn't necessarily going to be the key decision maker, the champion, or somebody who is actually going to sign off on the contract. But as what Nick is pointing to, they can provide juicy insights about the account that you can use further down the line as you talk to more and more stakeholders inside the account. And so it's obviously, like, is there a balance here? Sure, you don't want to just waste your time always talking to people who don't have any signing authority. But the flip side of that is, can you procure interesting insights, poke the bear, generate good conversations with people to understand what's going on inside the account? Because this is the missing link I see. Qualification helps get your list to a smaller size in your total TAM, and prioritization is essentially an assumption. You're assuming that today is better for XYZ reasons. And those early conversations are just validating those assumptions. You're saying, oh, okay, so I thought, I went and saw this article. Is that true? And then you're piecing together in the conversation you're having, saying, oh, I saw this, how's that working out for you? And they go off and validate all of the things you think are actually happening inside the account. Then you can take that, arm that, and use that to somebody else, or to go further inside the account, basically.
You know what I wish somebody would have told me sooner?
Hmm.
Going through this process, I always used to find people that were willing to talk. And it always bit me in the ass. And because they would give me information and they would go and set up meetings and then they go nowhere. And then I started to notice, and thank you, Challenger. Well, then I started to notice that the people that were really good is when you gave them that insight based on the proof that you had got going through that account, doing that account research process, and you hand them the proof, and they're like, "Are you sure?" And they start asking really good questions. But when I was more junior, I leaned away, and I'm like, "Oh crap!" Like I got somebody that's just trying to go and like derail this. What I didn't realize is they were trying to make sure it was true. They were validating your business case and seeing if they wanted to get on board. And I screwed that up for so long, so long.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay to as well. So my main, I don't know, transition point here as we get more into social is the other way you can do this, which isn't necessarily one to one, but is maybe many to many or one to many, is using social listening to procure some of these insights as well. And so, one thing that you're able to do, sometimes with platforms, sometimes just using the native search features. Nick and I are of the opinion that Twitter's search features are much better than LinkedIn's. But to search through the platforms and see what people are talking about, and Actually, some of the best insights I've ever gotten on some of our ICP clients is from Reddit, because there are great threads on Reddit about problems. People go to Reddit all the time and ask questions or complain about stuff.
Savagely going to be honest.
And that has built a lot of interesting insight or knowledge. And here's the balance. So sometimes a small bucket of the accounts or posts you will find by searching terms or keywords on social to find conversations that are going on is only going to build your industry context. It's only going to be broad based, right? It's things that you could bring into a conversation with an account, but it's not necessarily going to be about an account specifically. But then there's another bucket that is going to be about the account specifically. And this is a lot easier to find on something like LinkedIn or Twitter, when it is a particular product manager, HR director, sales, whoever, that is actually out there asking for help, posting about stuff, or talking about questions that they have. And then you're able to identify that that might be a priority for that person. And so using the platform as designed to find conversations can also allow you to do this on your own time. You don't always have to spend one-to-one time. But with the 5 to 10 people you've identified, that's probably a good idea. But if you're trying to build more insight, more knowledge about the account, Google's your friend, Reddit's your friend, Twitter's your friend. Using those places to search meaningful conversations about that account to figure out what is really going on inside. Am I right? Am I close? It's like a dartboard. Not everything you're going to hit is a bullseye, but the goal is you're not missing the darts, or you're actually scoring some points.
And I think the biggest problem when you get here is pitching
Mm-hmm.
too soon.
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys ever sat down with your significant other and
Mm.
they just want you to console them and you start trying to solve their problems and they get mad at you? Or they tell you that they don't have a problem?
Yep. Yep.
What was the, remember that infomercial? It was like the nail in the head.
Yeah, it's not about the nail.
You guys should Google that. It's really funny.
It's very funny. And the mistake that we make on social of all platforms compared to email or call is that people are logging into social to be social. There is I know, crazy idea.
I thought they were there to get promoted by marketing.
But the expectation is if you get a call from a salesperson, they are likely going to pitch you, right? Now, a good cold call may not feel like a pitch, but the expectation is it's going to be about a transaction. On email, kind of similarly, it's sort of obvious that they're wanting to open up a conversation. Social, the mental spam filters and what we call the brick wall, the reason they're going to tune you out is a lot higher. It's a much higher bar. And so on first approach, finding conversations or finding people inside an account, you do not want to start with a pitch. Honestly, there's like a small sliver of exceptions, but like 98% of the time you're not going to start with a pitch. You shouldn't.
It's just so much easier to warm up an account, warm up a person first so they know who you are. Going back to networking, it's like those people that really know you well from LinkedIn, and then you see them in person that are like a long lost friend. That you pick up that conversation like it never ended, or at least they're like, hey, you look familiar. Or you start talking like, hey, it's so great to meet you, but you don't have to be their best friend. You don't want to be, I don't know how to say it. You don't want to go and like, I see sellers do this all the time with me in InMails, and they'll be like, hey, how's it going? How's your dog? Do you have a dog? I like flowers and green things. Hey, and then they like spread it over like 2 weeks, and then they're like, pitch. But no problem was ever addressed in there. Never once did I say I had a problem. So I think this is why I say like pitching too early doesn't just kill the deal, it kills that relationship. It kills that opportunity to ever have a conversation again. And this is why I tend to lean away from ever using a nurture sequence, is because I want someone in that process is going to say, hey, this and this is happening. Oh my God, it's so frustrating. And they'll tell you if you get close enough, they will expand on that. And now you're off to the races. And the more information you can fill that in, almost like you're building a jigsaw puzzle, this is when deals start to really take off and they don't lose momentum. Because what happens is when you transition from booking that first meeting to starting your disco and getting through like the buyer enablement, is when you don't have enough of the jigsaw puzzle filled in, they bring in more buyers. The buying committee keeps growing because they're too afraid to say no.
And I saw Will Aiken just commented, it is a very funny video. But it's actually really important to to loop this in with what Nick's saying, which is we don't really have time to cover this today. We have a deep and extensive library covering this topic on our YouTube channel, which is your profile needs to be non-salesy in order to start these conversations. And I have struggled with this. The reason I say this is because I have struggled with this. When my profile headline or when my overall profile was very pitchy or salesy, and I would start a conversation with somebody, they're immediately on the defensive. They're immediately just waiting for me to pitch. And a couple of times, people just blew through it. They were blunt, loved them for it, and they're like, "What are you selling me?" And I was like, I'm not selling you anything. I'm not one of those sellers out on social. I'm genuinely here to have a conversation, and I want to know more about this stuff. But that puts you on the wrong foot if your profile doesn't provide you credibility to have these opened up conversations with prospects, or more open conversations with prospects. And that's because if people are expecting you to pitch, they won't be honest with you. They want you to pitch and be over with it. That's it, especially on social. And most of the pitches are so bad that it feels like they're wasting their time, right? If you put yourself in the buyer's shoes or you have been pitched on LinkedIn, I don't know, 95% plus of them are really, really bad. And so when somebody sniffs that out, rightly or wrongly, they're just going to want to get it over with instead of having instead of having a real conversation. That's why your profile is important. That's also why your approach is so important. So, Nick, what are a couple of ways that you prefer to route into an account on social
Just
without
one.
just pitching? Oh, okay. Yeah. Finish your thought.
When you send outreach that's really crispy and you hit on a really good insight that really makes them think, almost always look at your profile or at least Google you. They won't spend time going through your profile unless there's something super interesting, but they'll do a quick 3-second like, are you credible? That's it. You don't have to go in. Everybody gets like really in the weeds. That's more for our followers than it is anything else, in all fairness.
Yeah, it's
But you
true.
still need to do like, it needs to be done. Button it up. 3-second test. Do they know what you do and they know what you do well? And the biggest thing is if somebody was going to refer you, do they know what to refer you for? That's probably the easiest way of explaining it.
Definitely.
Okay, so how do I route into accounts?
Yeah, especially out on social.
I find the biggest thing is on socials, you need to find where people are active. And so I used to just go and lean on LinkedIn and I would just find the five or 10 people in the right area following that earthquake piece that were active, or get as close as I could to get introductions. I actually found that with doing a Google search and finding out what other channels they're active on actually works a lot faster, because before I would do it one by one. Now I'll do it in like one day. And the irony that I didn't realize, and Evan Patterson does this really well too, is when you swarm people with a really good message that makes them think, they start talking about you. And it kind of reminds me of like Finding Nemo and like the seagulls, boing, boing, boing. Is they'll like boing, 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 and they'll all go check out your LinkedIn profile or they'll start talking. And that's really interesting because now they're going to question you. And when you reach out and have that conversation, they'll allow you to go deeper. And so a lot of the time, what all I do is I figure out who's actually posting and I'll do a warm up. And it really depends. I set myself on a goal of 60 days. I give myself 60 days and I rotate. I always have new accounts starting, so I'm never waiting. But I go 60 days that I want someone to ask me for a meeting. And this was the biggest shift that I found that really worked on social is asking so good of questions that people asked you, so what do you do? Or I think we should meet. Because when you get to that point, they see the value in you and they trust you enough to move forward. When I found before, when I was just asking for the meeting outright, I got more no shows. I had a lot of crap in my pipeline that didn't close very well. Or I had people that had no influence or wouldn't give me the right information to go and actually qualify and quantify that opportunity. And so give yourself 60 days and let different deals mature at different rates. So you're not, trying to drag somebody through the finish line. I call it the bench. So I set up a bench for myself of deals, and I'll have anywhere. It just kind of depends on what your target is and your close rate, but you have a bench that's sitting there and manage that bench. So if somebody is getting a little cold and they're not as qualified, call it out and replace them. Hey, you know what? It doesn't actually seem like right now is the right time. Why don't we go and put a pause on this and I'll leave it in your hands, but I think we should wait a little bit longer. Replace them with someone that's really excited to talk to you and move that forward. I'd rather go and have that conversation than somebody that keeps pushing you off and keeps, oh yeah, not right now. We can't get everybody into the meeting. Oh, we're not really sure that this is going to fit with our methodology
All the excuses,
or
basically.
but have that bench and then manage that bench so it is the highest quality it possible can. And this is where prioritization gets really interesting, because you'll start to see subtle nuances that you never knew were a thing.
Hmm.
Like a VP of sales that is very dynamic on LinkedIn and on podcasting, but they're pushing on, maybe they don't believe in cold calling or emailing.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be really interesting, maybe for you, for whatever reason. But this is
Mm-hmm.
what I found is the best way to route in is 60 days, ask really big questions, have that lead with that insight,
Mm-hmm.
and fill a bench and just stay on it.
Mm-hmm. I think what I've noticed a lot is that people get lost in the sauce. So if you're on LinkedIn, you should not look at our inboxes. They are insane. And it is easy if you're starting to use something like LinkedIn or even Twitter to sort of get lost in the way that the platform is designed for notifications, especially. So, this is harder to do if you're using something like Reddit or Twitter for ongoing conversations. I think a spreadsheet could suffice, something just sort of simple, or even a notes app of like interesting conversations and just sort of, make it work. The benefit, obviously, on LinkedIn is Sales Navigator exists, and it does alleviate some of the burden of doing what Nick is doing. So, just a couple of things that came to mind. One is you should have all of your base qualification accounts we talked about saved as an account list in Sales Navigator. Okay. You're not going to have your total TAM saved. You shouldn't, for important reasons I'll point out in a second. You should have your
Sanity
base,
being one.
yeah, your sanity being the main one. Uh, you should have all your base accounts saved. And then you should also have other account lists of the smaller prioritized chunks. So maybe it's an account list. Nick, you love funny account names, but account list names, but basically like a list of ongoing conversations or a list of people whose hair are on fire, or, basically you're segmenting out the big list into smaller sub lists that then you can use for easier data, for easier navigation, etc. The reason, just really quick, that you want to save all of those accounts is that you will get notified inside Sales Navigator if anybody from those accounts are viewing your profile. So as you're warming up an account, if you have them saved, you can see who at that account is actually viewing your profile. And we use this to great effect because you don't have to do an immediate outreach, right? This is the thing. Like, we don't have to be super intense about it. What we're watching for is there momentum building? Over 30 to 60 days, are we getting more attention from this account? Are more people paying attention to us than they used to be? And that can trigger some additional outreach to the right people, depending upon the conversations you're having. But that only begins by having all of those accounts saved. And the exact notification that will show up is person, an unsaved lead at account, viewed your profile and has their photo and has their account title, and you can click it and you can learn more about that person. So if I'm using account lists, not just to organize information and make it easier when you get to lead lists, it's also to organize intent data specifically on LinkedIn. Do you want me to do another sales nav thing? I have another one.
Yeah,
If
keep
you want.
going.
Okay.
This is great. But I think this is the types of things that when we were trying all of this, that we're like,
Mm,
God, why
mm.
did we do this another way? Like the other way, it took so much longer when we were just doing it in Excel or even in HubSpot or Salesforce. It just,
Crazy.
yeah,
I think the thing that we've noticed, and maybe both Nick and I are a little resistant to, is logging all of the conversations as important CRM events. It's just not worth it. Sam asked a very important question, which we can answer. Sam asks, how many accounts are worth doing this at once to keep the bandwidth controllable? The honest answer is depends on your number. So, what's your quota? And what's your opportunity to close ratio? So, and I'm pretending this is a full cycle AE. If you are a BDR, SDR, and you are sourcing for an account executive, their quota still matters because it will inform your quota. But you're essentially going to reverse engineer the number of booked deals, the full quota, qualified pipeline or closed won accounts. You're going to take that. So if you know your closed won accounts, their quota is $1 million and your average deal size is $200,000. Just throwing out some numbers here as some examples. Then you're going to need 5 deals for them to hit quota. You know that the opportunity to close ratio of that account executive or of you is 20%. So 20% of qualified opportunities become closed won deals. So you are going to need 25 qualified opportunities to close 5 meetings. Did I do that math right?
yeah,
Is that 5
yeah,
20%?
yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
You got it.
That and then Nick's pro tip here, and I don't mean to steal your thunder, Nick, is you want 25, right? You need 25 then ongoing conversations, and you need 25 new conversations at any one point in time. That could be a little bit higher depending upon your booking rate and how likely it is you can turn a good conversation into a qualified deal. But if you only focus on new conversations, you're going to lose the ball and you're not going to. And if you only focus on ongoing conversations, you are going to lose momentum because the timing isn't right or whatever else. So you always need to keep the new deals going. Did I get
And
that basically right, Nick? I know this is
yeah,
more your
and then
formula.
absolutely. And so what I'll do, Sam, as well, is I'll also have everything's organized by account. And if you want to do this in a really fun way, I do red light, yellow light, green light. So I have those 5 or 10 underneath every account. So I just have it set up that I have my deals. And then I have the people that I'm talking to where they green light, they wanted to talk to me, or they yellow, like they're somewhere in between, or they red, don't call them back.
Mm-hmm,
And then that way I could see who I had ongoing conversations with and just manage it that way.
mm-hmm.
Because a comment isn't a conversation.
Right.
And so,
And and the thesis here, by the way, which is different than automated outbound, importantly, is that you're warming up and nurturing an account. You're not just doing direct outreach and looking for an email open rate or a response rate, right? You're looking for nurturing an account to become qualified pipeline based on your base level qualification and your prioritization criteria. So you don't need to do as much volume, especially for these larger deals. That's why we didn't take the qualified opportunity and then reverse engineered some booking rate, because that's not actually what's going on here. If you start with good
shouldn't be.
qualification, it shouldn't be. Yeah, right. If you start with good qualification and you work on your prioritization criteria, you just need to keep up momentum between new accounts and ongoing accounts. That's all. That's basically the thesis there. Over the course of 60 to 90 days is the timeline we think about.
And that's kind of where the art comes in, is just figuring out that golden number. And also for your sanity, how many you can realistically manage. I will say, as you do this more and more, you get better at it and you can do more.
For sure.
and using social in like one-to-many ways, not like, hey, I took a meeting with you and I magically ended up on your newsletter. Like, God, I hate that.
Oh, those are the worst.
Don't send me your shit. I never asked for it. But
Yeah.
once you start doing this, is you can nurture it in a way that is meaningful instead of just what makes sense for your company. You can actually do like an actual buying experience. And the thing is too, is you can also, if you don't have as many big accounts, you can also run this as a separate, you can also run smaller accounts too,
Hmm.
but do it a little bit less and just accelerate it. And
Hmm.
so for smaller accounts, is maybe instead of going to the personal level and diving in and doing like the 5 or 10, maybe you just do 3 or 5, like 3 to 5,
Yeah.
and you go more direct.
Hmm.
Hit them with an insight hard
Hmm.
and see if they want to play ball. If they don't, move on. Like,
And it does depend on your ACV. Like, is the juice worth the squeeze? If you're selling something at $3,000 a pop, you don't have the time to do that. Your quota is not set up for you to do a lot of account based work. But if it's higher, if it's 10 grand, 50 grand, whatever, then yeah, I mean, at the very least, it should be a few key people. It may not be 10 to, folks, unless if you're selling something a little bit larger. The last note, really quick, just on sales nav, another little pro tip is if you do save leads, if you create lead lists and save leads at those accounts, you can do a lead filter by account list inside Sales Nav, and then you can filter by active on LinkedIn or posted on LinkedIn filters, and so you can find the low hanging fruit leads at each of the accounts that you would like to target. And now you can organize that however you want. It doesn't, it's at this point, it's not as important to have really good, clean lead lists. And in fact, you may actually want smaller lead lists because Sales Navigator is going to notify you most of the time whenever that person posts. So then your notification list gets really, really long if you're doing all this together. So you may not want to save a ton of leads inside Sales Navigator unless if you want to engage with them and warm them up strategically. But honestly, there's a delay on the Sales Nav notification when they post content. So it might be better just going and following them and engaging with them natively in feed and
hit the
creating a
bell.
little like bookmark list in a spreadsheet, hit the bell, get notified in normal LinkedIn whenever they post, whatever it is. That's a much easier way to organize your time because this is really important. We've talked about momentum here. This is a marathon. You like, especially for larger accounts, you, there's going to be a Princess Leia, everyone in 1,000, right? Somebody who you call up and it's like the right time. Oh my God, yes, I needed your help. Oh yes, I can't wait to talk with you. This is exactly what we needed. Like that's a 1,000-year flood event. Like that's not going to happen every day. So you have to organize your time effectively and have these systems so you don't lose it all. And we say that, I say that from experience because I've lost it all and lost my sanity as a part of figuring this all out. Um, so that's uh, Sales Nav is helpful in LinkedIn, and I expect you can create some similar structure if you're using Twitter or Reddit or any other kinds of social platforms.
And there's tons of different social listening software like Trender.ai
Hmm.
and many others that make that a lot easier. The one thing that I never realized would be so much fun was multi-threading in DMs and comments.
Heck yes, he does this all the time with me.
You have say you're in your prospecting, you're starting to build this business case and you hear that there's a problem. Like this is something that they want to solve, or they need to go and learn a little bit more about this one subject before you can have the bigger conversation. I'll
Hmm.
tag them in a comment. I'm like, hey, we were literally just talking about this, and this article explains it really well. Or, hey, I just saw this video. I dove a little deeper than what we were talking about the other day. Love to go and have coffee and discuss. But don't just do one person. Uh, I try not to go any more than 5 because that gets to be a bit frustrating. But if you have, I find that golden number somewhere between 2 and 3, that those key people
Mm.
that don't normally talk, one's in the eye of the hurricane, but knows there's an issue because they've admitted it, but they don't know the impact. And so I'll use multi-threaded. DMs and comments to go and bring them closer together to have that bigger conversation between the two of them, not necessarily with me. I want them to start talking. And then
Mm,
you got to think, is this public knowledge or is this private knowledge? If it's public knowledge, it's nothing that would get you in trouble or them in trouble to say out loud, comment. If it's something that would get them in trouble, that they not the world doesn't need to know, DM. Keep it
mm.
private. And that's it.
It's super easy, and I have to say, Nick, you've generated some very interesting conversations in the DMs doing this, because in some way that this is discovery. It's just happening before an actual discovery call.
Yeah, and it's always interesting how one person might not answer, but the other person will go and give a little bit, and the other person's like, "Oh shit, well they gave a little bit, so I better go and like either correct that or add on." And we've seen that a lot where people will keep giving it, keep filling in the jigsaw puzzle, and then all of a sudden magically a number will come out. They're like, "Oh wow, like maybe we should have this bigger conversation because this is a $5 million impact to our business, and it's only going to realistically cost us 75,000 to fix. Good ROI.
And it
There's
all happens
there's a
in the
business
DMs.
case." Yeah,
Yep.
and with all the right people. So think about booking that meeting versus just a meeting on, you know, hey, this is crazy. I sell shit, so call me maybe.
And that's, but you've earned that too, because you're commenting, you're posting content, you're engaging with people, you've set up your systems, you're going after all different, you're commenting on people's posts.
Just while Morgan's dealing with his loud audio issues, I want to switch gears on the last couple minutes is when do you give up on social? So if you've done the research to figure out where people are active, where they're showing up, whether it's daily or weekly, never later than that, is that most people you can find a platform, not like you got to do some digging. This is not like nobody's going to hand you this on a silver platter. You do a little digging, and it usually so if they're on every week, there's a delay because this is social. It's not a prioritized list for them, and so it takes longer, and it takes 3 to 4 times longer than we would like. Just the reality of the game. And so I actually go and look at, so if I started my outreach after 4 weeks from that outreach, I have nothing. You've opened the door to start calling or emailing or taking other actions if it's an account worth chasing. But that's your warm up period. Honestly, you could even get away with 2 weeks because they've seen your name enough times. And if they're not, you can really button that up quick. Hey, we've been going back and forth in the comments. It seemed like this is of interest. Just wanted to give you a call and see if this is worth having a bigger conversation.
And imagine, I mean, and this is the difference from being an anonymous seller, is if you've been active on social, hey, if any of you came here today and I reached out to you or Nick reached out to you, you know us. I mean, you don't know us, but now you can put a face to the name and you're like, oh yeah, Nick was in my comments like 3 times this last week. And or Morgan had shared that really great insight in the DMs. We had a good conversation. And now it's not so weird or strange to just do cold outreach to a larger account. You're warming them up using social.
So, just a quick kind of recap, and then we'll let you guys go. The key to enterprise sales is finding a problem worth solving. That's it. Find a problem worth solving that if they do nothing about, it's going to be devastating to their company. And nobody wants to be the person that knows that something like a natural disaster was about to happen in their company, and they're like, yeah, it just didn't seem like it was that important. Find that as like, Chris Voss might call it a black swan, the thing that changes everything. Challenger, that it's that insight. Find that one thing that once they know, it would be irresponsible to do nothing about. Build that
Mhm.
jigsaw puzzle to show them a picture with proof, and spend a little time researching the best channels to reach out where they're regularly talking and having conversations, and ask great questions that make them think and earn the right for vampire sales for them to ask you, so what do you do? And if you do this and you just keep tracking and getting better, this is when you get to be more strategic, step back and play it like a game of chess, and it becomes really fun.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It's lovely. We do these every Friday, in case this is your first one. And Nick, do you want to close us out as usual?
It's 2022. It's no longer acceptable to suffer in silence. If you need help, whether you've been to the hospital and you've been like having heart conditions, or you've have a bout of depression or anxiety, we've heard it all, guys. If you need help, you don't need to buy anything. Just reach out. Join, like, talk to the people in the comments here. We are a community. We're here to support you. And you guys showing up every week means the world to us. So thank you so much. And if you need help, it's only a DM away.
Thanks, everyone. Happy
Take
Friday.
care. Happy Friday.